So people have asked me, well, what about the difference between a cash or an IUL and a whole life? Or maybe they've never heard of an IUL and they're talking about a whole life and they're going, well, all I read was whole life, whole life, whole life, but you're trying to talk to me about an IUL. Here's the thing. We can offer you whatever you want. Okay. I can sell whole lives. I've sold a few of them in my day, but, and I currently hold whole life policies as well. So I'm not sitting here to say, I'm going to only sell you one thing because that's my expertise. No, my expertise is life insurance. My expertise is also to make sure you get what makes sense for what you're trying to accomplish. In doing that, that's to say, well, some types of policies make more sense than others. Why would you want a whole life? Because they do have a guaranteed return, typically speaking, 3-4% on an annual basis or something like that. And people would prefer to have that guaranteed versus a market-based return because maybe the markets aren't guaranteed. Although, and so as opposed to an IUL, which can give you market return type income or growth. And so, some of the policies that we'll work with might have, 4 or 5, maybe even up to some of them done 14% compound annual returns. And here's the really cool part, they're indexed. So those returns are locked in. So as that money goes up in value, it locks that money in. The market maybe pulls back, your policy doesn't. So now you're borrowing even more money against that original money you started with. While, because if I'm getting say a 10% return on a policy, but I'm borrowing at a 5% rate and I don't even have to pay it back. That's the crazy part. I don't even have to pay it back. But if I did and I borrowed at 5%, I'm making 3% of my money if it's at an 8% return. I'm making 5% of my money if it's at a 10% return. Whereas if I'm in a whole life policy and I get a guaranteed 4%, but I'm borrowing at 5%, I'm still owing money on my money, right? I'm just getting a cheaper borrowing rate.
It's still a lot cheaper than borrowing the money from the
It
bank.
is.
Like
It is.
way cheaper.
So the reason why people do want to lean towards a whole life over an IUL, typically the reasons I find is because all the books they've read, all the education they've got, that's all that's being talked about is the whole life. That's how I got into whole life is I didn't even know an IUL existed until after I was a whole life owner. And then I started learning about an IUL. I was like, that's what I should have had. Why? Because for the same amount of insurance, it costs me less, right? So it's a more cost effective product. But at the same time, I can put more money above my target premium, where a whole life is a fixed target premium.